Consciousness is vast, reality is fluid, and what we call the paranormal may just be part of the human experience. We move through life searching for certainty, but every so often something happens that challenges what we think we know. A flicker of movement in an empty room, an intuition too strong to ignore, or a moment that lingers long after it's passed. Some call it supernatural, others call it psychological, but maybe it's both. I'm Mallorie, a therapist exploring the threshold between psychology, the supernatural, and the transformations that happen in between. Whether it's unexplained phenomena, personal awakenings, or the ways our subconscious and the unknown intertwine, this is a space to wonder, to question, and to explore what these experiences mean for us. Because what matters most isn't what we experience, it's how it transforms us. Welcome to the Liminal Mind.
There are moments when the body speaks louder than the mind, when its wisdom breaks through the noise of productivity, performance, and pressure. And sometimes, the only way that it can get our attention is to break, to collapse, to shut down. This is the first episode of a series that I've titled The Body as Oracle, and it is born from my own unraveling, from lungs that were stressed under the weight of unprocessed grief, muscles that ached beneath invisible burdens, and a nervous system that could no longer keep pretending that everything was fine. But I need to note that this didn't start with pneumonia. It started years before I even lost my breath. I want to be very clear about something. My body didn't suddenly fall apart. This accumulated. My sacroiliac pain began in college, long before I had language for boundaries, nervous systems, or trauma. Back then, I thought pain was just part of adulthood, something that you worked around, something that you ignored and pushed through. Then came pregnancy and a traumatic birth, and then diagnoses that came quietly and late, including PCOS, endometriosis, adenomyosis. Pain became cyclical, predictable, and therefore normalized. Like so many women, I learned to function through it. Early motherhood collided with graduate school, work, caregiving, and emotional labor. Somewhere in that stretch of years, my nervous system began to fray. And that's when dysautonomia symptoms started. Heart racing for no clear reason, dizziness when standing, exhaustion that sleep didn't touch, and a body that no longer felt predictable or safe. And yet I still pushed through. Last year, I had a hysterectomy, a complicated mix of relief, grief, and reckoning. This year, I got COVID, and shortly after, pneumonia. That's when my lungs finally took over the conversation. And here's where research matters, because this isn't just my story. There's extensive evidence linking chronic emotional suppression, particularly in women, to autonomic nervous system dysregulation and autoimmune illness. Psychologist James Penbaker and immunologist Janice Keuchelt-Glaser found that suppressing emotional expression increases physiological stress and weakens our immune response, while expressive disclosure improves immune functioning. In other words, what we don't express, the body carries. When the body says no, documents how people, especially women, who suppress anger, grief, and personal needs are disproportionately affected by autoimmune disease. The body will say no when the mind cannot. Women are diagnosed with autoimmune conditions at 2 to 4 times the rate of men, according to the American Autoimmune-Related Disease Association. Nearly 80% of autoimmune patients are women. And when it comes to dysautonomia, organizations like Dysautonomia International report that over 75 to 80% of patients are female, with symptoms often dismissed as anxiety, stress, or psychosomatic before a diagnosis is ever made. This isn't coincidence. This is sociology meeting biology. From a sociological lens, women are trained early to prioritize harmony over honesty, care over self-protection, and endurance over expression. We fawn, we accommodate, we manage emotional environments. Over time, this chronic relational stress taxes the system that regulates cortisol, immune response, and autonomic balance. Studies show that early relational stress and ongoing emotional suppression alter stress hormone regulation. increasing vulnerability to autoimmune and inflammatory disorders. And eventually, it shifts from survival into shutdown. According to polyvagal theory, the nervous system moves through states based on perceived safety. When stress becomes inescapable, the body enters dorsal vagal shutdown. Low energy, shallow breath, brain fog, immobilization. It's not pathology. As Deb Dana writes, the nervous system doesn't break, it adapts. And then through this year, it felt like my body had slammed the brakes. Like it was saying, Mallorie, if you won't stop for your own sake, I will stop you. To lose breath is not just a medical crisis, it's a spiritual one. I was drowning in obligations, but what I was truly suffocating under was unacknowledged grief. The lungs, according to traditional Chinese medicine, are the seat of grief. They represent boundaries, taking in life, and letting go of what no longer serves. Louise Hay, whose work is often cited in spiritual communities, suggests that the lung issue can represent depression, grief, or feeling like there's no space to take in life. And the grief wasn't just personal. It was ancestral, collective, ecological. It was the grief of trying to carry everyone and everything without rest. In human design, I am a generator with emotional authority. So that means that I am wired to respond, not initiate. And I need time to ride that emotional wave before I make decisions. But I was not living that way. I was pushing, performing, people-pleasing, and all the while bypassing my body's internal no. So this is what generator burnout looks like. It's not just tired, it's existential depletion. It's pouring from a dry well for so long that the well cracks. And here's where polyvagal theory becomes essential. Stephen Porges teaches that the vagus nerve governs our capacity to feel safe, connected, and grounded. When we push through overwhelm, we often shift into dorsal vagal shutdown, a survival state where the body goes numb, fatigued, or immobilized. It's not laziness, it's biology. So, when my chest felt like it was holding centuries of sadness, my body wasn't broken. It was speaking to me. In the teachings of many indigenous cultures, illness is not simply physical. It's energetic, relational, and often spiritual in nature. A late Cree elder described how illness can come from living out of harmony with your own spirit. In My Grandmother's Hands, it was written how trauma is not just experienced, but stored, not just in the mind, but in the tissues, muscles, and breath of the body, especially for those who carry generational trauma, cultural disconnection, or systemic oppression. As a white woman, I want to acknowledge the privilege and limits of my own lens, but I also believe that honoring cultural ways of knowing is part of healing the fragmented body, the colonized body, the capitalist body, the body that has been trained to override its needs for production. In archetypal language, she's the one who gives and gives until she disappears, and she forgets that she too is sacred. In mythology, she might show up as Hestia, keeper of the hearth, who forgets to tend her own flame. She might be the figure who appears breathless, buried under blankets or bones. This is not pathology, it's a threshold, a descent that demands that we let go of who we were pretending to be. This is where my colleague and friend, Sarah, comes in. She's trained in somatic experiencing. She could speak here about what it means to help the body feel safe enough to come out of the shutdown, to find breath again, and to let the nervous system know that it's no longer on fire. Sarah, thank you for being here today. I'm super excited for everybody to learn about all of the cool things that you're going to share with us. I love that you're open to sharing your experience. We'll just go with that. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. My name's Sarah Dabney. I'm a licensed independent mental health practitioner, as they say, in the state of Nebraska. I've been working as a therapist since 2017. Started out a lot in things like EMDR and internal family systems, and then transitioned to a main focus of somatic therapy in 2020. And a lot of life unfolded in that space and since then. It's relevant to our topic today.
Yes. How much of your professional trajectory has followed your own personal experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. All of it, for sure. a lot of therapists joke that as they're learning things in their own life, clients will come that are learning similar lessons. And I've definitely found that to be true. I think later we'll probably dip into, I'm a big human design fan. And that's also true to my profile. I have a 6th line, which is the role model line. And that's not so much about being a researcher or an expert or having all the answers so much as it is about living your life, and the answers that come together for you in your life are ones that are available to other people that may have similar problems as they seek you out, and have definitely experienced that in my professional life.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a joke that like you go into psychology because you're messed up and you're like trying to figure out what's going on for you.
Yeah.
Side note, my mom and my youngest daughter are both the role model part. So
it's a beautiful one.
I'm going to watch and learn from you so that we know what's going on.
Excellent. It's an interesting life path for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the idea came from, I had a lot of my own health stuff that's been going on. Things have been building and trying to figure it out. So I had this idea of the body as oracle, right? So as someone who does a lot of somatic practice, I know that you and I have had conversations about my personal experiences as well as yours. So I think that's honestly, with the whole role model thing, right? The best way is to hear other people's experiences to draw from that. So are there parts of your story that you are willing to share and comfortable just being like, this is what was happening and this is where it went with it? Was it led by your experience and then we turned to that professionally? Or was it more of the opposite where, well, I'm really interested in somatics, and you started and then you were like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good question too. It's a little bit of both actually as I'm thinking about it. The main meat of the story I'll probably share today does come around the time of the pandemic, but I got interested in somatic therapy before that just because I noticed that some of the other mainstream trauma therapies weren't resolving the roots of what I was trying to work on in therapy. And, you go from one modality to the next, just trying pieces and see what fits into your personal puzzle. And eventually I started working with therapists that were like, well, I do this thing called somatic experiencing. Would you like to try it? So I had some personal sessions that way with folks that are now colleagues that were early in their training at the time, but it was enough to really whet my appetite. And so right around the time, the setup point for my body breakdown, I guess, I had actually started the training already by that point. So I really feel flow, or the coming together of both the resource, exactly what I would need, and the hard circumstance, right? I both had to go looking for more tools during the hard circumstance, but was already like also set up to succeed kind of by these earlier inklings and invitations that got me into somatic experiencing training as a first inroad into somatic therapy.
Do you feel like having that opportunity of, your experience crossing over with, you were already starting the program and learning about the things, deepened your interest? I mean, I'm sure it made it a little easier to understand conceptually when you're also going through it at the time you're learning about it.
Yeah, definitely deepen interest and like awareness too. I always tell people that are asking like, hey, if I wanted to get into somatic therapy, where do I start? And I would say, so somatic experiencing training is 8 trainings over 3 years. It's a pretty significant investment, but you really do come out the other side almost with like a different life philosophy than you entered with. And so, yeah, those pieces were already beginning to come to play. I was more aware of and more like open to partnering with my body through hard things than I'd ever been before. For your astrology listeners, I'm a double Aries sun and moon. And so that, leans me way toward, it can lead me toward override, right? There's some beautiful courage in that. But partnering with my body and listening to it was not something that I was familiar with coming into my own therapy journey. And so I think it was that. In another way, it also sometimes made things more difficult, not cumulatively, but because I was so much aware, I felt things so much more deeply. So there was also a cost to the raised interest and the raised awareness, which, although I wouldn't change that for the world, did really make me feel every part of losing the grief journey of losing my mom to cancer, and then my own medical issues that arose after that. So both and.
Yeah. While we're on that trajectory, knowing that this podcast is psychology and that line of spirituality and that liminal kind of threshold area. So it feels like that program for you was kind of that space where those two things met, where you're saying you came out with a different philosophy of how you were living. How do you feel like your spiritual perspectives shifted and changed throughout that as well? Do they feel body related, or do they feel like different aspects of you?
There probably is overlap. For me personally, the change in direction for my spiritual journey probably preceded that too by, I'll say 5 years. I'll say 2015 is probably when mine like took a sharp left turn. And it's not like you jump right from one set of beliefs to another usually,
Sure.
but like the slow fade of, oh, what I've believed till now doesn't seem to pan out in every way. I saw this great Instagram reel last week that was this reminder. They say that there are 8 ways of knowing. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to remember them all, but faith is certainly one, right? The faith ones that you're raised with or that you adopt along the way. Science, the medical model or reason is another. But you've also got intuition and imagination and your, depth of sensory quality that you're picking up from the world. And the meeting place of those 8 ways of knowing is the best synthesis of knowledge and wisdom. If you're only leaning into one or another, you're going to tip too far, or you're going to miss something, or that's going to become its own addiction even. And yeah, I do think that somatic experiencing training and somatic work dovetailed nicely with that. But I would say in that it was deepening that body way of knowing for me that had been so cut off and so shut off for so long. But I also had other tools, resources, and people that were helping me reshape the faith side of my knowing too, in a way that felt more congruent overall. So still both and. I'll probably say that for every answer.
Yeah. So do you feel like it was more of a balancing of those 8 ways for you? Where like maybe your spiritual religious belief was like, we were really into that.
Right.
And then as that sort of shifted, that created space for more interest in the body awareness or other aspects?
I think so. And the trauma that I experienced in 2015, that was really the rupture point of everything that my body was telling me at that point, and everything that how I was living my faith up till that point. They just didn't, there was no overlap anymore. There was no congruency. And so something had to give. And the main thing that had to give, since I'm living an embodied life as a human, was the faith beliefs had to reshape and reform somehow to match the lived experience that I was trying to allow and let in and all of that.
Yeah. You use the word rupture, and so that's pretty significant. That's kind of like your turning point. Talking about stress, work, and emotional suppression, how did those contribute to your health challenges and, that pinnacle of where we maybe started to shift from those 8 places and making them a little more balanced?
Yeah. There's so much story there, but one of the elements that you and I have talked about a lot that I kind of already referenced that happened at the beginning of the pandemic was that my mom got really sick. She had a cancer diagnosis, and actually this was the 4th time she had cancer since I was in 2nd grade. She had breast cancer then thyroid cancer after that when I was in college, and then somehow found breast cancer in a lymph node like 20 years after the fact.
Yeah.
And then the final cancer that she was diagnosed with, being stage 4, was lung cancer, which metastasized, turned into a brain tumor. I'd been developing one of those other ways of knowing, which is intuition. And any other time that my mom had been sick, it's terrible. It's no good. But I never felt fear, and this time I actually felt like intuitive fear for the first time, or just intuitive dread maybe of this is going to be the last one, because they live overseas. She was able to come back to the States one last time, and then enter, of course, January 2020. The pandemic arrives. Countries close all over the place. There's not going to be any traveling between the two. I had a couple different body talking episodes around my emotions regarding that over the next 3 years, because they have amazing therapies now. They were able to prolong her life through targeted therapy for about 3 years. The culmination of that was my gut just tanking for about 18 months after she passed, mostly out of hindsight's 2020. The inability to take care of her caused me so much anger and rage. If you fast forward all the way back to birth, which we could do probably a whole podcast about too, of birth stories and how those live in the body and stuff. I think at the time of my birth, I kind of made a little baby vow with my mom of, Mom, when no one else has got you, I've got you. And the pandemic absolutely like cut that possibility in half. And yeah, did we have Zoom? Was that great and better than what we would have had 20 years ago? Absolutely. I'm so thankful. And we sent boxes. We did everything that we could to make her as comfortable as we could without being there in person. But what my body wanted was to care for her, was to take care of her dying body and really let her know on a larger family level, because she had my dad, but on a larger family level that she wasn't alone. And really for her to have her turn. She was very much caregiver, took care of everybody else. That kind of mom, really one of the best moms she could have asked for. But I always had this like little nagging grief for her growing up of she never got her turn, or she never took her turn. More accurately, there were people that would have given her a turn, but the Enneagram 2 in her didn't always know how to make space for that or receive it. And so this was going to be her last turn, and I really wanted her to have it, and we weren't able to make that happen in a way that my body was just longing for and just like driving toward. That leftover anger, which didn't find a lot of expression because, you know, she's at the epicenter of this thing. I'm not going to dump into her how angry I feel about the fact that she's choosing not to return to the States. There were many good reasons why she could get her medication cheaper over there. They had insurance that would cover things. It just wasn't possible to pack up 40 years of house and move back when she was already sick. There was lots of good reasons.
Yeah.
But I feel like I totally got away from the question.
Angry.
Yeah.
You're angry really about it.
And that being that particular kind of knowing, actually being the emotional kind of knowing, being one that weirdly lagged behind the others, even doing all the work that I've done, being a therapist for this long, those kinds of emotions, I hadn't arrived yet, or hadn't given myself permission to arrive yet. At the place where I can be like, oh, this is a kind of knowing. I don't have to resist it. I actually need more ways of opening to it and expanding it and expressing it. Yeah, the gap between wanting to be able to do that, but not finding the time, space, permission, or correct tools to do that in a way that would help it move through instead of getting stuck.
Well, and you're a woman, and so anger has this dark shadow over it, right? For women to express anger or frustration, that's not really something that we're taught how to do in a way that releases that energetic aspect of the emotion.
Totally. Or even how to tolerate the energy in the body, even if we do choose to do that. There's a difference between doing that because we know it's like expression is a tool, and being actually able to integrate and resolve the enormous waiting energy, if you've never done that for, over 3 decades, which I had, that's waiting to be released, right? In the right containment and all of that. But yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. Going through this and then moving into this somatic experiencing program. And then after that, integral somatic psychology, which is a little bit more, I think, of that tool for expanding, right? We're talking about capacity. As a side note, putting it out there that none of this is blaming people for the way that the symptoms show up. If we're not processing these emotions, it's not necessarily a causation. It's like a capacity issue.
Yes. Capacity and knowledge too. I was a therapist and I didn't know how to work with energies that were that big in a way that wouldn't blow me out of the water or collapse or shut me down. Yeah. Some of these are very survival-y stuff. And yeah, absolutely not even blame of the people that help contribute to those circumstances either. I firmly believe we are all doing the best we can with what we have. And I think it's Maya Angelou, right? When we know better, we do better.
Then these programs gave you opportunity to know differently and do differently. What was that process like for you? Learning these new ways of processing or helping others to process, and also having this recognition of, oof, I've got this big thing looming. Yeah.
Well, okay, I have to back up into the story a little bit because I actually didn't start on the end of being able to use somatic experiencing, which I'll also call they call it SE, and then ISP for integral somatic psychology, just to shorten them. because they're mouthfuls. I didn't get to those in time, to be honest. My body just, like I said, it tanked after Mom passed. So she finally passed away in June of 2025. And after she passed that August, I finally got COVID for the first time. Hello, grief physiology. I had it really badly. I got a secondary infection about 4 to 6 days, somewhere in there, with really abnormally high heart rate. Doctors were really concerned. I got put on really strong antibiotics to kick the secondary infection. That kind of started a downward trajectory for my body of everything that my gut had been screaming for a long time, which is, we cannot digest this. This is an indigestible experience, or an indigestible amount of grief, rage, pain, all of that. So I started having episodes of just a really raw belly, which I never had before. I have a family history of gut issues, but my gut had been like cast iron since I was little. Couldn't eat just about anything, and frequently did. Yeah, for about a week at a time post-COVID. And I thought it was just long COVID for a while. And not that it wasn't, but I thought that was all it was. So I would try to eat more gently, or like just focus on protein and set down some rougher foods or spicy foods or acidic foods or whatever. And for about almost 8 months, I kind of got away with it, with seesawing back and forth between I'm eating everything and nope, we're not. We're eating a little more gently. Still digesting grief this whole time. It's not that I wasn't attending to my own therapy. There was no like total ignoring or denial or anything happening. But finally got to, I think it was March of the next year. Oh, I think I said wrong too. I think I said Mom passed away June of 2025. It was June of 2022.
Okay.
That she passed. So the next year, March of 2023, finally hit a patch where I was like, oh no, I'm not recovering. The pain is actually increasing. I'm starting to lose more and more foods. Can't do raw vegetables or fruits. There was kind of a steady decline after March, and really pretty rapid until June, July of that year, where I got down to about 8 safe foods, about 700 calories a day, lost 30 pounds in that time, which is a lot on my frame, and where the medical model really failed me. People working so hard, I had the endoscopies, they recommended acid blockers and stuff like that, and we're basically like, hey, this is probably a life sentence for you, but this is what we have. Please get used to it. Answered the questions that they could, but there was so many questions that they couldn't answer, and my intuition, which I had cultivated a lot since 2015, was saying, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. We need to focus on healing the underlying issue. But that was really tough without knowing what the underlying issue was. So June of 2023 onward, I did kind of a deep dive into functional medicine solutions for those kinds of things, read a lot online. I actually dropped regular talk therapy, because I'd reached an impasse with it. It's, I'd done what I could on the mental level, and I turned a lot more to things like cranial sacral therapy, so hands-on touch work therapy, massage, and then eventually a functional dietitian that I found, protective things to really start healing the gut tract. There was an underlying, again, I'm going to call it a vow, or some people would call it like a contract or an agreement or a belief, a deep experientially felt belief. I think it was my cranial sacral therapist that eyeballed me and sat me down. And she was eventually just like, you have to tell your body that you want to live. We are getting into the danger zone, baby, and it's time for you to tell your body that you want to live. And she's Libra and like really positive. So for her to say something like so blunt and like to the point like that, it really like got me, like it got through to the heart. And that was kind of my realization point of, oh yeah, I had known on some level unconsciously that part of me was like, I don't know if I want to live in a world where my mom doesn't exist. Or she's gone, right? But that was very like deeply and kind of more unconsciously held. And it wasn't until my cranial sacral therapist was like, hey, this is what you need to tell your body, that I noticed, oh, there's resistance there. I actually don't want to say that out loud, that I want to live.
Yeah.
Interesting, right? But she made me say it that day. And every time I said it, I was like, oh, I don't want to. She's like, I know, say it again. But took that with me by the time I got home, about a 15-minute drive. And I was saying it in the car still on the way home, because I knew that she was right. You have those intuition points where you're like, ding, that hits the internal tuning of work. That's correct. And by the time I got back to my own kitchen, and it like faces south and the sun was streaming in, I was finally like able to like say, like align with it and say it kind of wholeheartedly of, I want to live. I do. I want to live this life, the life that I'm in the body that I'm in. I want to live.
Without the resistance.
Without the resistance, without
Mhm.
the splitness,
Mhm.
right? The split intention or the split manifestation or what have you, right? And I burst into tears, but it was like, cleansing tears of, okay, then we're doing this. And if I'm doing this, then the body, which is so loyal, and your body will pretty much do what you want it to do, will get on board. And my upward trajectory began from that day, like measurably. I was doing measurably better within a month. And some of that was the functional protocol and stuff, but a lot of it was just my energy knowing what we decided to do. And that was to heal. And that was to go on and to reform a life without my mom's physical presence and that being not okay, but okay.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the larger story around that.
Well, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable about it. We appreciate that. So now if we can transition over a little bit more to what you were learning with somatic experiencing, how that information has helped you to process some of your own things, but also how your experience sort of piqued your interest into this to be able to support other people through like, hey man, your body is talking to you.
Yeah.
Let's listen to it.
Yeah. So a little more on both of those for listeners too. I think this whole area is always a little in danger of getting too jargony. Both SE and ISP are really powerful somatic approaches. Love them both. They're bottom-up practices for resolving chronic trauma and stress and overwhelm through the medium of the body and the nervous system. So while there's going to be a talk element to them, because the 5 areas of our experience, which are, sensory impression, emotion, meaning, your internal body sensations, and then your behaviors, they're all relevant to any therapy you're using. Well, SE has a strong bent toward noticing the body sensations themselves and impulses that might arise and supporting the resolution of those in a titrated way that allows for resourced, manageable doses of whatever the overwhelming experience was to come up. They would use the word like discharged or integrated. Whereas I always say, to me, ISP feels like the left hand to the right hand of SE, because ISP was developed by someone who's actually still a faculty member that teaches. But he was noticing that sometimes just following the client's system is not enough, right? Some of us need way more containment and direction. Some of us need to be told, hey, this is how you track that the emotion's getting easier. I needed that for sure. And so ISP very specifically focuses on increasing the capacity for the emotions that you find overwhelming in the traumatic experience, whatever it was, which would otherwise cause shutdown and flooding, blocking, processing, and integration. So SE focuses a lot on tracking and following the client and containing and reflecting the experience. And ISP is more directive and both psychoeducational and experiential around how to experience and express emotion in a holistic way. I believe that's what we're here to do as humans, is have a deep emotional experience, usually a really intense emotional experience at times. And being able to do that often results in rapid expansion of the ability to orient to overwhelming experiences with a higher tolerance for them. So it's not that you're no longer feeling the emotion necessarily, but you hold it. You literally feel it in the body in a little bit different way where you're like, oh, yeah, that's still really big, but it's definitely more tolerable and not as overwhelming.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's where are you noticing the things? How does it move through your body? So you can identify, like you said, you sort of follow it, but that doesn't always necessarily bring a resolution where it might take the edge off a little bit, but it still isn't quite tolerable.
Yep.
And so then ISP allows for more expansion of that sensation or emotion so that it isn't so concentrated.
Yes.
So it
concentrated, contracted.
Disperses.
Yeah.
So
your body
you're bringing
learns
capacity.
It. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It's like an alien visiting another planet and being able to go, oh, this planet has this kind of blah, 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 oxygen air mix. Okay, we can calibrate our equipment to that so that we can breathe.
Yeah.
ISP kind of allows you to do that with emotion. It allows the body and the cells to encounter the emotion in a different, less overwhelming way and to learn that it can tolerate certain degrees of overwhelm and resolve it. Broadens your emotional capacity in general. I love SE. I still use it every day, but every modality has its downsides.
Sure.
ISP's downside is that's all it does. Not a one-trick pony exactly, but that's what it's for. The downside of SE is that if you track body sensation alone too much in a non-integrated way, and sometimes that's necessary for helping people notice, oh, this is why this emotion feels tolerating to me, because it's so tense, it feels like a heart attack when I'm having it. And being able to track and go, oh, but I'm not having a heart attack. That's a very useful thing. But on the other hand, if you do that too much, you kind of risk collapsing the emotion or dispersing it or making it not an emotion anymore. You're only tracking body sensation. You actually lose the meat of what it is that you're trying to resolve, get better at, reprocess.
Yeah.
So,
okay. And I don't know how much this necessarily fits in, but I've been also kind of on this journey of decolonizing practice and recently have been reading on polyvagal theory. And when we're talking about like a window of tolerance, right? Somatic experiencing, there's a lot of expansion and contraction. We make it bigger and then it gets smaller, and that changes the way you relate to it. But this idea of tolerance, if we're looking at marginalized communities, like just because you can tolerate it,
right,
doesn't mean that it's
kind of a loaded word.
Good, right? And so calling it like a window of choice, so that when you have expanded capacity to a certain point, you're able to make healthy, effective choices rather than like the word tolerance. And I just think that that's really cool. So I'm gonna like stick it in there real quick. But
I like that.
I think that that's also interesting when we're talking about body experiences, because I'm going to experience things differently than you or the next person. And so framing it as how are we able to respond to those sensations or emotions rather than being bowled over or shutting down. And, you know, we talk about collapse or freeze, those sorts of things. So
yeah, I think SE and ISP are both heavily weighted toward the point is to help the individual reach a place of more choice in how they orient to their own experience.
Right.
It's not about erasing experiences. Like we are in great part our history. And that's important to be able to integrate those pieces the way that we want to in a way that feels good for us.
We defined somatic experiencing and ISP and their purpose. So if we can come back to like how that supported you in your journey, and then we can kind of shift gears to what that looks like when you're practicing as therapists.
Yeah, totally. Jesse is the modality that really taught me how to listen to and partner with my body. And also just think, why don't we partner with something? Usually we're afraid of it. We don't understand it at all. So it was this beautiful introduction to interoception, being able to go inside the body and go, how does my diaphragm feel? Oh, I feel my pulse. It's a little fast. Rather than going, oh no, my pulse is fast. Oh, notice that. Can I be with it? Can I ground into it? Say thanks for beating fast. Those are really simple ways, but both in doing actual trauma processing using SE tools and also just the overall philosophy, which is you have a personality and you have an organism, and life is a lot about helping them partner together. That is the number one thing that I've taken away from SE, both as a person and as a professional, being able to both believe and reassure people, hey, you're actually, you don't have to be at odds with yourself. You don't have to pick between two really good things. And there's some fundamental parts work there too. But yeah, how do you do that with a body sensation as opposed to another voice in your head, right? How do you not be afraid of something that maybe someone else made you afraid of at some point, or a body impression or a body habit that is still echoing for you that you have shame about or fear or frustration about or whatever? How to kind of turn that back into partnership. And then ISP, again, very much in the space of, oh, I can actually feel my emotions on the really intense high end. I can like evoke them for myself or allow a therapist to help me draw them out more. And the experience of that not having to be flooding or collapsing, instead it can become really empowering to notice, hey, there's this massive energy in my body that has a context, and the emotion itself matters regardless of the narrative is true or not. Can learn how to feel really big anger and vocalize it. And that doesn't have to be a weird thing. That can be a very human thing. And as I vocalize it, whoa, the energy shifts in my body. Maybe it even gets initially a little more vulnerable. But then there's this cusp where my cells kind of learn it, right? The energy is spread out enough. My organs and my muscles start to orient to it differently, and my breathing eases, even if it's still really intense. And I have often a moment of clarity where I'm like, oh, yes, and this is how it is. And I don't have to change that. And out of that comes more mental clarity, or maybe the narrative shifts. The important bit is the emotion really getting to have its own moment, and not only adding to your resilience and widening that window of tolerance or window of choice in your future, because you know how to expand around this energy in a way that you only knew how to contract toward it before. That's pretty life-changing for a lot of us. It definitely was for me.
Now, if you can share how you apply these with clients,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like more often you are doing trauma work. I work with a lot of women who are high functioning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who sort of bypass all of these body signals. And then we get to
Mm-hmm.
a certain age and they're like, I can't do life anymore
Yeah.
and I don't know why, and
Yep.
it's really hard. And it's pretty common that they'll come in and like, well, I didn't really have like traumatic childhood. So they're assuming big T trauma, like a big
Mm-hmm.
car accident or war, and not taking into consideration relationship or the safety that you build with people and systems around you, where your nervous system is compensating for that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's not something that people
Very
are
unconsciously
talking about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not conscious, right? So
Mhm.
using these modalities helps people to be more aware of that. How do you work differently with someone who is in a high functioning freeze state versus somebody who gets to that point and like moves into collapse?
Mhm.
Can you share what the difference of those two are for our listeners? And then how does the approach differ based on those modalities?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, if these terms aren't familiar, you can kind of think of like a gas pedal and a brakes pedal on a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have heard the terms fight, flight, freeze.
Fawn.
Fawn is it was a really good new one for like the pleasing defense, which is more common for women.
Faint.
Yeah,
Faint
faint's
too.
another
So
one. Yep, that'd
collapse.
be up in the freeze category. So we don't have words for this in general parlance, but there's also food, fun, family, and friends, right? So there's this green area that would be our normal brake, if you will, on the car, where we kind of roll up to a stop sign and we're just like gently squeezing the normal brake, and we're like, okay, here we are. We're just resting at the stop sign.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be our turn to go soon. Okay. So that's more going to be food, fun, family, and friends. That's going to be that area of rest and digest. I slow down naturally, and this kind of brake pedal feels good to me. Then you got your gas pedal, which is going to be your fight, flight, that middle kind of yellow light, I guess, if you will, where we're like, oh, there's some danger, but we're still squarely in the I can attitude inside the body. This is really hard, but I can do something about it. I can overcome it. I can move through it.
So we're accelerating a little bit.
Accelerating, yeah, into the gas.
Some activation, people might say.
And that could be positive or negative, right? We need positive activation, some fight just to go into it. It doesn't have to be danger. It can be, man, I have all these emails to tackle, right? That'll still raise your activation level, but it can be either positive or negative, depending on the meeting that you're assigned to that particular task. But then we'll get into emergency brake territory, and that's your freeze, right? That's I didn't see that coming. I don't have the resources to meet it. I can't beat that car across the intersection, so I need my emergency brakes in those moments. A deep freeze is going to be more that collapse that you're talking about, or the faint, or the dissociation, or feigned death if you're a possum, those kinds of things. Functional freeze is where you're still sort of hovering or pendulating, meaning going back and forth across the line between freeze and fight, flight, right? So you have a significant amount of sympathetic charge, that's that activation, but also this dorsal parasympathetic that's trying to go, wait, this is also too much at the same time. Like if we really go hard on the gas pedal only with this, we'll probably have a heart attack or stroke. That'd be the way, like, waist extreme end of this, right? So your body's trying to help you titrate the right degree of emergency power to meet, could be a job or relationship or general life circumstance that feels deep down unsustainable or kind of threatening, but where your brain or your heart feels like you have no choice. This is what you have because this is the relationship I have, or I have to make money to live, or whatever is driving that. So you're sort of straddling the line when you're talking about functional freeze, which means you need tools for both, and you need literacy and education for both, and about how to recognize what the traits of each of those are, so that at any spot on the spectrum, you can meet yourself and go, okay, here's my landmarks for this particular spot. These are my tools.
So that one is sort of like you got both feet on both pedals. And
exactly.
You're like, which one do
right? That race car moment.
Okay.
And that's really exhausting, right? That's very taxing on a car engine, let alone a human nervous system. Right. Most people here, have also some symptoms of burnout, literally thinking of those tires peeling out under the influence of both the gas pedal and the brakes pedal. And that's kind of what it feels like to live that way for a long time.
Do you find in your work with clients, if someone comes in and they're more in that collapse versus someone who is, very activated and like, go, go, go all the time, I can't slow down, which in my experience tends to end in kind of that collapse, right?
Yeah,
At some
'cause it
point.
isn't sustainable. You can only do that and some people can do that for decades. It's wild what we can do if we've decided. Again, it's those vows. It's those, what do I believe deep inside? It's especially if we think there will be an end point, even if the end point is 20 years from now, when the kids are out of college and I can afford to work less. If we give ourselves a deadline, it's kind of amazing what we can put up with. Some of us.
Yeah, man.
Doesn't make it good, but
That is ringing a bell for
yeah,
me.
because there's hope. We can do a lot with hope. It's often when that hope ruptures or fractures that then the body goes, okay, then we're not doing this anymore. Then we're laying down right here. We're not negotiating anymore. You were asked as someone that's in collapse.
Do you find that it's awareness of how their body is responding or their nervous system is responding? I mean, obviously, you're going to work with whichever state they're in, but do you find that there are patterns of what people have been through or particular emotions or life situations that tend to put people in either like really active, go, 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 or the like, nope, we're at the point of collapse? Or is it more nuanced where it's just depends on the person and how they are specifically responding?
Yeah, to your point, I think it probably is both. It both is highly nuanced to the person, and you can have the same person come in 2 different ways, 2 different weeks, right? One week they're still chugging along, and the next week they come in and are in total collapse. And you've probably seen this too, but women's hormones, if we're premenopausal, that figures in here, right? Someone in luteal phase is going to present very differently than someone who is in follicular phase. Overall, though, if we're talking about helping someone who's in a collapse and they've hit that point, I always say the 2 common factors that I see most often for like you're still chugging along, it is the hope, which we already talked about, like the hope of this is going to end. It's been too long already, but I just have to hang in there till I graduate from grad school. Or I just have to, once I get married and we move to North Carolina, things will feel better. We'll start over. If you have that kind of hope, that can sustain you. That may not protect you from a crash at the end of that because your adrenals are going to need recovery time. There's going to be something to pay, right? So it's not avoiding that, but I think people can like hang in there for crazy amounts of time when they have hope. The other sustaining factor that I see most often is love. I'm doing this for someone, something greater than me. And so I can hang in there and hang in there and hang in there because I'm getting something back from this, which is getting to serve, love, and be close to the thing that I am devoted to. The body is and I say just as if that's like, the body is sacred and it's also just a body. It's a human limited body. It's going to have to pay the piper at some point. If I have a client coming in true collapse, it is different because they're probably not starting at the psychoeducational level because you're not in learning brain anymore. It's probably just about all they can do to show up for therapy to make it to the session. Maybe someone even drove them. I work with people that have adrenal fatigue or sometimes POTS or those kinds of things. So those kinds of brains, if you're going to teach it all, you want to use more story because that's something the limbic brain, your emotional brain can understand. And if I'm telling them anything, I'm probably telling them something like, this is a common thing that I do use. I'm teaching them about the rabbit down the hole, right? If a rabbit's been running through the forest for a long time and finally got home and she's down the hole, she just gets to collapse and heave and breathe, but know that the fox isn't going to get her, right? She's finally in the hole, but she's still shaking because the fear is not worn off. And if she goes back out to eat something, the fox might still be out there. What we would do with the rabbit down the hole, if we were to help the rabbit down the hole, is we don't go to the hole and then shout down like, you're doing great. Do this breathing exercise. Can you repeat to me what I'm teaching you? That's not what we do. We don't try to like make them perform or get their attention in that way. It's a lot more this quality of, hey, I know you're in the hole. I'm just going to sit here by the hole. And if I see you peeking out and you need something, I'm here for it. Take your time and I'm not leaving you in the hole. I'm going to be here. So literally sometimes that's what it is. If people are in deep physical or mental emotional collapse, I'm often just like sitting, I'll pull my chair over next to them and sitting next to them. And then as their physiology, because again, they can't track it. The overwhelm is too high. As their physiology, sometimes simple presence is all someone needs. But if we're talking about habitual collapse, the little moments that I notice their diaphragm expand to take a deeper breath, I might go, oh, that was a nice breath, right? It's like reflection. I'm not just going to wait till you come back out of it. I'm going to actively remind you of the physiological changes that your body is going through, even just in 30 minutes, right? That us getting to rest here, and maybe we tuck a little blanket behind your neck, fully support the neck and spine so the body starts to get this message. By the way, we talk a lot about the vagus nerve, right? You mentioned polyvagal earlier. One of the good things to know about the vagus nerve, especially if you're considering somatic therapy or need somatic therapy, is that I think it's 80 to 90% of the vagus nerve is not from the brain, it's to the brain from the body, right? So we do have to engage body comforts, sometimes body movements, attention to body breathing, and using that as, okay, as these shifts happen, reflect on those and go, oh, see that information that's going to your brain? The brain then is getting two reflections of something's feeling a little safer. Something's feeling a little more rested, a little more expansive. And that becomes its own resource point. And I, as the therapist, can help narrate that and contextualize it. And the positive things don't get lost. Overwhelm. It's hard to feel what feels good. Someone tracking that for you and with you makes it land, and that can become an upward spiral moment. And from there, you can keep resourcing them a little bit more complexly. And that can become a thawing, because what goes up must come down, right? If you've gone all the way up into complete collapse and freeze, at some point as you thaw, there is going to be a rush of energy. You have to come back down through sympathetic charge to get back to the non-emergency break. And so there's going to be some rage. There's going to be some tears or sadness and fear.
That happens a lot with the population I work with too.
Yeah.
Where we work through some of that initial trauma response. And then they're like, why am I so mad?
Yes.
And I'm like, because it
was already there and now it's thawing.
You're allowed to be mad.
Coming to the surface.
It doesn't,
is a good thing.
This is the process. Like, we're moving.
Yeah.
We're, up past that hill and we're coming back down. Like, I know it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
But it is progress.
It is progress.
We are healing. Anger is part of that. Which not everyone is always going to have anger as that main thing, but
some version of activation is.
I do find that women in particular be like, I went through all of this and now I'm angry. Should I be angry?
Yep.
The coming back down from that freeze.
Back down. Anything. That's a number one rule for somatic therapy in general is when it's safe enough to happen, it will. Right? It's a lot about supporting feel safe with any internal context, right? So as soon as there's enough, whether it's the therapeutic relationship, the, tool resourcing, whether it's their home environment shifted, now they've got more ground under their feet outside of therapy. As soon as the organism goes, oh, there's enough significance in the safety column, it's amazing what'll just unfold on its own. You won't have to go digging for it. It will just be like, here I am, anger or whatever else it is.
My system tends to run on that, like both pedals at the same time. I know I'm tired, but I don't always feel like I can stop, which I'm really, really working on it. But I notice that if I am going to have a panic attack, it's generally once we kind of pass the, if we're looking at that hill or whatever of the emotions.
Yeah.
Once you've been stuck up at the top, it's when I start to come back down that I'm going to have my panic attack or my body just is like, okay, I can't hold on to this anymore.
Yeah.
But it's generally, we can see an end in sight.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I held on for long enough and now I can let it go.
You've technically survived the emergency at that point. On some level, you can afford to have it, even though that's not ideal or comfortable, right? Yeah. Again, the body's, it's so genius and so adaptive and so loyal in what it does. And he just deserves all of our love and partnership and understanding and patience.
Yeah. The body stores the emotion. If we're not allowing the emotions to move through or it's not safe to express them, we talk about how they sort of get stuck in the body or stored in the body, which again, we're not saying that that's fault of the person, right? Like you're not emoting correctly.
Right.
It's just that your body is saying, well, I don't feel safe enough to do it in this way. So what does that look like when our body is holding on to the emotions like the grief or the rage or the shame? How do you perceive that, or what patterns do you notice?
Like anyone in any industry, therapists can get stuck in ruts of the scientific model for this that was available when we were in grad school and stuff. So I'm actually trying to change my language about this because more and more, our best answers for how things get stuck are still guesswork, right? But our understanding of the brain and what I'm calling energy, or scientists might call it your body biofield, which is both within and larger than your skin on body. SE and IST would both argue that an understanding of energy is relevant here. So yoga, for example, for any yoga enthusiasts, talks about like the gross body and the subtle body, okay, the physical body and the invisible energy body that extends beyond the skin. One like tangible, measurable example of this is your human heartbeat. It can extend 3 to 7 feet outside your body. So right now, you and I are sitting close enough that we're sort of sitting in each other's heartbeats, probably, which is a really sweet idea. So how we used to talk about it is a lot. It's almost like trauma is hidden in closets in the brain, and you have to access those closets and help like excise or purge or reintegrate the trauma. And I think that there's parts of that language that are still helpful. More and more, though, what seems to be true or sort of measurable or provable is that around experiences that we have that were overwhelming or just repeated over long periods, we develop energy and body habits. And that trigger comes up, the habit reignites. The good news being, whatever we can learn, we can unlearn. But that's kind of the viewpoint that I take around this. Having tools that things like SC or ISP give you for reversing physical bracing habits or posture habits that then restrict flow or transfer of energy, those become really useful here when we're talking about those kind of stuck patterns. So that's kind of what I do, both with myself and with clients. I'm so fond of the clients on my schedule. I'm very specific about listening to my own human design and my sacral yes. People want to work with me so that I make sure that I'm a good fit as well as vice versa anymore. So really enjoy my work. And also sometimes you still have hard days and you take home stuff. And I think it was yesterday I just got home and gave me a hug. And there was just this quality in my body of, oh God, human experience is so hard. We go through so much stuff and intensity and barriers of our own creation, mostly, but barriers, right? And just grief over it having to feel so difficult. Yesterday, I reached for an ISP tool and my husband was giving me containment. So the SE component of it's something resourcing here was there. But I remember just doing kind of rounds inside myself while he gave me a hug of, okay, yeah, feel the emotion of grief and almost like existential longing for it to not be this hard, right? I felt it in my kind of like chest and into my diaphragm a little bit initially, and it was fairly tight, fairly local. Using little sounds, little images, little facial expressions to help that energy relax its edges and expand out a little bit more deeply, right? SE has some tools that help you spread the energy. Use self-touch points, and so I did a self-touch point for my chest and belly at one point just to help it circulate in my larger torso and take up space in my body. But it didn't change from being grief, right? The point is to feel it, but to feel it tolerably. And just doing that for like probably no more than 90 seconds. It wasn't very long, but by the end, my breathing had shifted. I was holding it really comfortably in my torso, and it's not that I felt like I had to like get rid of the experience or anything. It's just, I want to partner with what's happening in my body. I want to orient to it in such a way that it can feel part of my experience, not something that's taking over my experience. So just as like a real mini practical daily life example, I do that for myself all the time at work and at home. And it's going to look pretty similar with clients depending on what we're working on in the moment.
Yeah. Last week, I was getting ready to go on vacation, so there was already positive stress, but it's still like, oh, I gotta get the house ready and do the things. I'm excited to go, but I have a lot to do. And we worked on creating that like safe place as that resourcing, which I was like, oh yeah, I can easily come up with this like resourcing space. And then she was like, okay, well, what does it feel like for you to use that throughout the week? And I was like, no.
Wait, what?
Because all is great and well, but then when I'm coming out of that space, no.
Yeah.
So there's this part of me that's like, yeah, that is great and that is calming and relaxing. But again, it's that break and the acceleration at the same time where I can tell that my body is clashing. You feel that shift or where the things just bump up against each other.
Totally.
So I've been around it, signed up for the ISP training. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
But it's, again, the intellectual piece, totally, I can understand that makes total sense, but it's in practice where it's like, my body doesn't quite understand what we're doing here.
Totally.
And why are we going into this place of safety when we know there's stress? Like, what are you doing, ma'am?
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
I think that's just par for the course, I guess. But.
Yeah, that's very familiar. I remember those points of my journey too. And something else to your point that I work on a lot with clients, in fact, anyone that has something chronic Mannlicher complex. It almost always comes up. But I just call it the, recoil energy. Whether it's I recoil from coming out of safety back into something more stressful, if I've even been able to get there, or I recoil against the idea of going into safety because that sounds like it's going to cost me more energy to go in and then come back out. So we've got to have some answers for those mental parts inside of us that have those concerns.
Yeah.
We've got to work at that level so that we're not just overriding them and they get to partner. Being able to actually work with the energy and the emotion of how bad that recoil feels in the body, right? It's very shocking. It costs us something. And so tools and practices, experiences that help us tolerate that better and even expand that quality in the body. That's what I love about IS. Concrete emotions, like we're talking about the usual ones, the anger and fear and stuff. You're like, oh yeah, expand that in the body. But you can actually do this with physical pain. I've done it with joint pain before, or my revulsion against the joint pain or the stomach pain or what have you. You can do it with almost anything that you can feel. Raja talks about, the most basic form of emotion, sensory motor emotion, just being, it feels bad. Right? I don't have a name for the emotion. I'm just aware that I feel really crappy.
Doesn't feel good. I don't like
it. It doesn't feel good. And that's all you need to work with that. And expand even that until quality of being with it, the orientation to it, as in what my brain thinks of it, shifts a little bit. And it's so common. Yes. And so useful.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of talked about this at the beginning with where you're talking about like the 8 ways of knowing that in this kind of work, whether you're doing like therapy or the coaching or whatever ways you're working to support people, can be really easy to lean too far into one, like you said, over the other. So too far into a spiritual explanation. As a general example, somebody's experiencing schizophrenia, where if you have only a spiritual lens, you're going to be like, they're possessed. You go into the extremes because you're seeing it from an extreme perspective versus only looking at the medical model.
That's right.
Well, these things are happening because of XYZ, and you're not looking at the systemic perspective of
take your medication, you'll be fine.
Yeah. So how do you find the best way to hold space for more than one?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good question. Like you're saying, if we find ourselves leaning too hard into one, by the way, I don't think I could remember all of them earlier, so now I have them in front of me. So it's emotion, language. That was one that I forgot earlier. Language is a way of knowing, which I love. I love that. I'm an English nerd. Sense perception, intuition, imagination, and memory, all important as data points. I think one of the most important skills for balancing and not tipping into like a reaction stuckness in one of those or an addiction to the logic because we think it's going to keep us safe or whatever. I think learning to hold equal opposite truths until they synthesize. And the difficult part of that is that can be months or years, right? Something where we think we have 2 equal opposite truths for some time before the synthesis emerges. If we can't tolerate uncertainty, we're not going to have any choice but to fall toward whichever data point pulls most strongly or is held by the most prevailing culture, right? So I try to cultivate that skill in the ways that I can. And sometimes that's through, spiritual meditation practice. Sometimes that's through imagination visualization exercises that EMDR and SC and ISP can teach you. Sometimes it is memory where I'm like, okay, history teaches me that uncertainty does resolve. I can sit with this a little longer, or I know how to expand the discomfort of sitting with the uncertainty when I'm being demanded of or begged to have an answer, like one concrete, specific answer. I even know how to sit with that and gently resist the demand and tolerate the discomfort. So if I were to pick one, I would say that's the move. If you can develop that skill, sitting pretty as far as not moving too quickly when one data point presents itself necessarily.
So being able to hold that tension and not let it pull you apart.
Exactly.
Or one way or the other.
Yep.
Okay.
And we're at a really, really interesting point in history for practicing that.
Yeah.
We have lots of fodder for that mill.
Yeah. I can't even tell you how many clients come in and it's either they're so overwhelmed by everything that's going on and the news that they can't handle it, or people are like, no, I just don't watch any of it.
Right.
So it's like, am I overinformed or do I have my head in the sand? And then, there's guilt on both sides.
Right.
Or frustration. And so it is a lot of practice of how do we stay in the middle to where you can still take care of yourself, still, have a heart and care about what's going on and feel like you can support people in that. And where do we find that balance? And that's definitely something that's come up with a lot of my clients lately.
Yeah. And if you're in one of those places, to me, that's kind of like to me, the tension there feels like it's kind of between emotion and logic a little bit. And maybe it's more complex than that. But that particular example, a nice trick that I first learned in EMDR, and it's been present in all the other modalities too, because let's be honest, even if there's people that are like, this modality and it's the best, you're all borrowing from each other.
Right.
There's only so many. Yeah, anyway.
It's all just different words.
If you're stuck, the trick is if you're stuck in the processing, let's say you're trying to EMDR your way through a body sensation. Great. See if you can switch the channel. Is there an image that goes with? Is there anything that your body wants to do, right? To wriggle away from the, So you switch the channel. And that's something else I've learned to do, knowing that there are these 8 data points. Okay, if I'm tension or I'm triangulated in between emotion and logic within myself, can I shift to a different data point? Again, what does memory tell me about these standoffs in myself? Or what does my intuition tell me to do with it right now? Not necessarily does my intuition tell me one or the other is right, because that's still triangulation. But what does my intuition tell me is right to do with this tension right now? Am I meant to like mull over it and hold it a little bit actively today? Is it a better day to set it down and recalibrate? What other data point can I bring in to kind of break the stalemate a little bit? Still tolerating uncertainty, but like sometimes we need joggled out of the freeze where the I don't know panic can become, I don't know. And maybe that's okay. Curious, I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Like, or if people are talking about, social media or the news in particular, like you don't have to consume all of the news.
That's right. It's not all or nothing.
Staying away from it if that doesn't feel good either. Maybe you just pick a cause and go do something that makes you feel like you're being productive, right? So that's like, putting your body in motion. Does that mean I'm going to go like talk to people about it, or I am going to go to a protest, or I'm going to sit and meditate on it and send love to people? Like we can take different approaches, but it's that like rigidity that kind of makes people unable to tolerate the tension.
Yeah.
We expand it to other options.
That's right. We can pull a different direction. And that'll kind of return us to our values. What's my underlying value? Well, I want to feel connected. And I do have something that I want to give to the world. I don't want to abstain from that just because the news is really flooding or overwhelming for me right now. Great. Just like you said, there's so many other ways to meet that need besides having to watch the news. Yeah, you can go serve instead. You're connected and you're giving something back to the world. Voila. Yeah.
What advice would you give to other practitioners who are navigating their own health challenges while holding space for others?
$1 million question, right? I still love the adage that your best is what you can do without endangering your mental or physical health. Your best is not what you can offer while overriding them. I think that that's for any of us in helping field. I think that that's easy to forget in the emergency moments in a session or this time of history that we're living. We can take away a lot of our own choice in how we show up and respond to life. And to your point earlier, that's going to collapse our window of tolerance because we've taken away choice inside of it. So I'm always encouraging myself, colleagues, supervisees, or even clients that are on their way to joining the helping field, like carefully cultivate your relationship with your own grounded body tuition, because it's not going to lie to you, and to learn how to listen to its cues in that loving, patient, curious way. Any of us that want to can learn and find our own healthy parameters, even if it takes years to develop that sense, years of trial and error sometimes. And the sticking point, at least for me, is usually the willingness to set down the cultural conditioning that tells us that we won't get as far unless we override those parameters. So it's maybe a lot faith, a lot trust, I guess, but trusting that there is something in that. I think that becomes more and more obvious the older we get. I think by the time we get like mid-30s, 40s, like we've already kind of proven to ourselves that that's true. We've been through the ringer of seeing if we're the exception to that particular rule.
Right.
So yeah, permission to trust that and to practice the cost of loving and trusting those parameters until we hit the tipping point of proof that this is more sustainable. And again, that can take some time, like healing from anything chronic, right? And so in the middle, I think it is a lot faith of I can tell or I know there's small measurable indicators that I'm moving in the right direction. I have not arrived yet, and that's frustrating. I'm going to trust it anyway, but I'm moving in the right direction. And I need to cut back even a bit more. Again, frustrating, and I probably will have my own like grief moment with that over again. But as we do that, and as we discover more of those sacral yeses, I think we can trust that we'll have that re-expansion moment. Maybe not to the degree that we'd like dreamed of when we were little and we thought a big life was the only good life. It's about expanding out, and sometimes it's about contracting deeper intentionally to go, okay, I'm going to rebirth this thing. I'm going to retool this thing until I find that middle that is, okay, is my best. I am going to bed kind of like deliciously tired and satisfied, but in a way that I've not drained my own mental, physical resources past enduring. So it's kind of a mouthful, but that's I think what I would say to younger me and therefore to others inquiring.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that you feel like we didn't cover? It's just anything that you feel like would be important for people trying to navigate, like, what is my body saying?
It really is shocking. Like if you go to ask your body a question and your intention is pure, right? Sometimes on the front end, like if we're like, I've asked my body things and she doesn't say anything, there's probably a part there that's holding that back for you. And I've had to work with those before that I was like, oh, I grew up being told to not listen to my body, not overtly like that, but like the body as lower form of intelligence or not altruistic maybe. So sometimes we have to work with parts that have had messaging around that or deep down know that if we do talk to the body and the body actually answers our question, we're going to have to fundamentally change our life quite a bit. And that's scary. So sometimes we have some upfront work to do with like parts that are like creating barriers to hearing from the body. But by and large, and I never cease to be like delighted and amazed by this, when folks are ready to ask their body some specific questions, and it can be someone that's never talked to their body in their whole life. And maybe they're in here with a chronic pain issue. And then, we're like, can we just ask the body, what does it most want us to know? Almost always, I would say 95% of the time, they'll get an instant answer if they're open to it. And often it's something pretty simple like, I'm exhausted. And that's not something that doesn't know on a mental level, but it hits different. It hits different to hear it from the voice of your body, something that you've been blocking out or didn't have permission to listen to. Again, it provides one more data point. And all of a sudden, instead of just 1 or 2 data points, now you've got 3 or 4 data points all in the same basket of, oh, dang it, we are exhausted. Yeah. So my encouragement for people, if they're wanting to hear from their body, I most of the time, unless they're those blocking parts, it's just try it and see what you hear and be aware that it might not be words. It might be an impression or an image or just like a knowing without any of that. Just like whoosh, all of a sudden you just know something, right? But you can do that. You can talk with your body as a part. In fact, she's probably waiting for that. Don't be afraid of it. You don't have to have a degree or any special training to do that. And then, integrate, journal, think about it, talk about it with people that you trust, what you heard, and let that be a data point for you. The body as oracle is again, it's one data point, but it's a really important data point.
Thank you. It was beautiful to have you here.
It was really fun.
I always love our little chats. I am sure I'll find another way to like wrangle you in for another episode. We'll figure something out. I was just curious if you have any short practice that you would like to share with listeners, something that you find effective. I mean, I know you kind of just talked about like just ask your body and listen. But is there a method that you like to use when you're working with someone, maybe like just at the beginning, as listeners may or may not have a lot of experience with this, just to kind of help people to be aware?
So I'll teach just a short example. I'll even throw out an ISP tool for funsies called Ether Element. We won't take the time to do all 4 limbs, but if you can do it with 1 limb, you can do it with all 4. It's about connecting your joint to one another, partly because when we are in a lot of overwhelm or stress, we do just clamp down. That's the nature of the human body, right? And that can cut off a lot of blood flow, can cut off lymph flow. One of the things that it does also cut off is energy flow. So literally access to your subtle body, which is a nourishing field, among other things, for the physical body, projection of the soul. And so they call it like the queen element or the king element in ISP because it informs and nourishes all the other elements that they use in the practice. And you can do it on your own. So you'd use one of your knees. So right now I'm crossing my right leg over my left knee so that I have access to the kneecap. I'm going to use my right kneecap as an extra hand while I'm doing my arms. So I'm placing my right elbow on right kneecap, and then my left hand is going to go to my right shoulder. So I'm connecting my right shoulder joint to my right elbow joint. And then the focus part of this is you feel into the center of each joint. So I'm feeling down into the center of the shoulder joint. And if you're really overwhelmed, it's okay. Take your time, take a few deeper breaths, maybe even lay a hand on the head for a second, on the forehead or on the brainstem, just to kind of calm the brain. Once you're back feeling into the center of the joint, and you can kind of picture it in your mind's eye to begin with, then eventually you're going to be able to kind of go, oh, something's relaxing, something's opening in there a little bit. Same thing with the elbow joint. So I'm feeling and seeing into the center of the elbow joint, because joints will contract too. And joints are actually your communication hubs within the body. So when those shut down, it's really difficult for regulation to take place, because there's always a wave of dysregulation. And that's how the body knows to send you a wave of regulation if your nervous system's pendulating well, right? And once I've kind of got a feel for those two joints, I'm going to picture the space in between, the pathway in between those two joints, the connective, communicative pathway. And you can picture it as a line of golden light. And as you're feeling along that pathway, you'll likely feel something open. For some people, it feels like increased blood flow. For me, it literally does feel kind of like an energetic opening, something expanding within the arm. And as that happens, I'll notice just more, SE and ISP would call it life force. So it does feel like kind of like flow of blood, but it's bigger than that. It is flow of energy, something bigger and warmer than the blood in your vessels. Again, your cells just orienting differently to your intent for them right now. And so you do that 2 joints at a time. So I did shoulder and elbow. Then I could move my right wrist back to my right kneecap if I wanted, and move my hand down to the elbow, and do the same thing with those 2 joints. So feeling inside the elbow joint, feeling inside the wrist joint. And this is opening me up enough that I feel my diaphragm shifting already, like deeper breaths are starting to become possible because I'm opening up this right quadrant. And then just getting to enjoy that shift of expansion. And we know when something's expanded 4 different ways. One, I'm narrating out loud. It's in the energy. We can feel the energy is different interoceptively. Another way is the breath, right? We can't have energy shift without our breath kind of shifting with it, because it'll make the most of whatever space we have to give it. Another one is just muscle. So my muscle tone might shift. And I don't always notice that one, but I'm noticing that as I'm doing this with the right arm, my right shoulder has dropped quite a bit. The muscle down shifts with it too, because I'm just opening, expanding that more. And then sometimes I'll also just notice, increased mental clarity. Oh, I couldn't hear the clocks in the room. And now all of a sudden, there they are. Overwhelm decreases as we do use tools like this. So you do the exact same thing on the other side, elbow to wrist, and then the same with the legs. Connecting, putting your fingers on your hips such that your fingers are kind of in the hip crease a little bit, because your femur actually connects up to the joint in your groin rather than on the edge of your hip. So you tuck your fingers in there and then put your other hand, so right hip to right knee, same thing. And breathing, staying with the breath. It's really easy, I think, to do these kinds of practices where you're focusing a lot and you start to hold your breath instead of staying breathing. So keeping your breath like slow and easy. This is not a race. You can take your time acclimating to practices like this. But once again, feeling inside the joints, hip to knee, and feeling that generous opening or warmth or down regulation, grounding sensation in that upper leg, and then knee to ankle, and so on for all 4 limbs. So it's a beautiful practice. And any of these will follow the intention that you have, right? Just now I'm narrating that with the intention to create calm and grounding and down regulation. So that if that's the intention you're holding, that's what'll happen. You can use these same tools to help you process something. Set your intention before you begin. But practices like that I've used to help myself with, insomnia nights, some down regulation or more space internally in general. If it's been a high tension, high contraction sort of day, it's one that you can use every day, absolutely. Sometimes multiple times a day if you need. Versatile practice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
I'm going to go home and make my family do that.
All of you, all around the dinner table.
Yeah, everyone join in.
It's so easy to do with kids too, right? You don't have to even you can teach them, but I'll do this on my husband, just like sort of while we're watching TV or he's had a hard day. And he just thinks I'm touching him. He knows that I do this kind of stuff, but I'll just, hand on his shoulder and elbow, eventually shift. And you can do this even on little babies, right? If they're having a really hard time sleeping, because your intention as mom or dad is going to shape the energy and shape what's invited. So, yeah.
I love that.
Try it and see.
Okay. Well, thank you again for coming in and chatting with us today.
For having me.
If anyone is interested in reaching out, what is the best way for people to look you up, read about you?
Totally. Find me on Psychology Today, Sarah Dabney, Dabney, in Lincoln, Nebraska, or you can email me at Sarah Dabney Counseling, and Sarah has an H, Sarah Dabney Counseling @gmail.com, and I'll be happy to respond.
And for the human design, you can do that out of state because that's not your therapy license.
Yes. Yep.
So I just wanted to clarify that if people are listening outside of Nebraska but are still interested in the human design, they can still
chat.
Reach out. All right. Well, thank you. We'll see you whenever I decide to have you back.
That's right. Thanks, Liminal Mind.